Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you. Please, please. Welcome, welcome. Please make a plate. Always want to thank Lisa for the incredible food. And if there are any kitchen volunteers here, thank you so much for your help and this delicious meal. We're going to start today with a question. Obviously, that was the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson. Very sad about to learn of his passing. God only knows what I'd be without you. What I actually want to talk about, because one thing that we'll miss together during the summer hiatus is Tisha B'Av, which is the destruction of the temple, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. Oh, there's Lisa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for life. And that was actually the central question with the destruction of the temple. God only knows what I'd be without you. What is Judaism going to be without the temple, which is the nexus, with the meeting place between God and people? It was a temple-based Judaism, right? What's going to emerge from the ashes of the temple? This is actually a question that Marvin asked. I was could call you out last Shabbos. He was asking basically, would it were that the temple was never destroyed? Of course, that's as Jews. Of course, it's a disaster that it was destroyed. Would that it never was. But Marvin is asking, but what came out of it? Is it not almost ultimately to Judaism's benefit and good? Obviously, the adaptability that came with it, the portability that came with it, the rabbinic tradition that came with it. So it was a very interesting question that you raised, and we're going to explore that today, which is the nature of the relationship of the diaspora. And when we talk about the diaspora, even though that's the whole world, mostly where are the largest Jewish populations? It's Israel and the United States. So I want to explore the diaspora relationship, particularly the United States and Israel, but also Babylon, and Jerusalem. So with that, the opening question for you all, and I also want to welcome Stuart back here with us, who's here. Obviously, we all feel your mother's loss every day, Jackie, who we all love. Her memorial is this Sunday here at B'nai Ashurin. We're so glad to welcome you back. This is your first stop back, so I'm glad that you're here with us, and we miss her deeply. Go ahead, Bob.
So everything that happens is supposed to be to God's plan. So Hashem planned Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to say this here, but in certain circles of my family, I don't dare say, should we celebrate Tisha B'Av instead of mourn?
Okay, interesting. So Bob is saying, and then I actually want to pose the question for the room because I didn't quite say it yet, but Bob is saying God has a plan, right? If that's the theology that you hold, that everything happens for a reason, it's all part of God's plan, then why do we mourn and lament it? Why do we read Eicha, Lamentations, and sit and weep over the destruction? If ultimately, I will say that there's the rabbi at Bali Bet Shalom, Rabbi Nolan Leibovitz, who came here with his book, The Case for Dual Loyalty. He has a complicated relationship to Tisha B'Av. Hi, Helena, welcome. So glad you could join us. Which is that he says, in light of the modern state of Israel, is it right to be mourning if we don't also celebrate the modern state of Israel? That's sort of his corollary to Tisha B'Av. But the rabbis, and then I'll get to Ron, but then I actually do want to give I didn't actually officially word the question to everybody.
What was your question?
Yeah, it's not written on the handout. Yeah, which is that the rabbis understand it to have been in part our own fault, right? The rabbis don't just say this was God's plan. They say that we brought this upon ourselves through sinat chinam, baseless hatred, right? The first temple was destroyed because we engaged in the big three no-nos, bloodshed, idolatry, and the forbidden, incest and forbidden relationships. But the second one was because of sinat chinam. We had baseless hatred. It was hatred against our fellow Jews, right? So the rabbis don't just say that this was part of God's plan, although they do say that the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar were God's agents carrying out God's will. So you're right, Bob, that definitely is how the rabbis see it. But it's not the only way they see it. They also see it as, we brought this on ourselves. And it's because of our our sins, and that's worth lamenting. The question I wanted to ask everyone is, and then we'll get to Ron, if we can all make Aliyah tomorrow, what justifies the diaspora, right? In an age where next year in Jerusalem could literally be followed with tomorrow in Jerusalem, what justifies the diaspora? I'm sure we've all thought about this because we're all proud American Jews. So I'm curious how you make sense of it. Go ahead.
I have an answer to your question, but I'll hold it.
Okay.
I was going to say, I don't remember.
I have microphones too.
I love using. I don't remember where I heard this. I think it was a podcast in the last 10 days. I think it was Hadar. So you probably know who it is. But they said that fast days, although they're fast days, are also supposed to be joyous.
Can you say more? Why?
No, I can't. You want to hear my answer to your question, though?
Yes, go ahead.
The reason for the diaspora is you can't be a light unto the nations if you're not in the nations.
Okay, great. Right. So you can't be a light unto the nations if you're not intertwined with and amongst the nations, right? In that way, it's expanding the reach of Torah, right? Not just to be in Israel, but to have a global presence is to be emissaries and emanators of the light of Torah amongst the nations. Great. Other responses? Go ahead, Sheila.
That's the thing. Their idea is bringing to we need the converts.
Okay, great. So there is great. It's an interchange, right? It's an exchange. It's not just that we are sort of out. Hello, hi Linda, welcome, welcome. So glad you're here. Corvette convertible, very, very stylish. Riding in style. Feel free to make a plate. We should make some more room, but there's also the inner part of this if you want to come and be on the inner part of the U shape. So that it's an exchange, right? It's not just that we are emanating Torah to the nations. There is actually also something to learn from other peoples, right? As much as there is the brilliance of our Jewish tradition, there is much to be learned amongst the other peoples and cultures and traditions of the world, right? So we benefit from that exchange. Great. Go ahead, Bill.
If we're sure that our covenant with God still holds,
Yeah.
and if we were sure that by us all moving to Israel, that would be part and parcel of this covenant, and secular to religious Jews would all be seen as fulfilling that covenant, then I think that would be a strong motivator.
Okay.
Great things would then happen. If that's not the case, if we're concerned that even if we get a bunch of Jews over to Israel and we have a 80-20 split secular or not, and that relationship doesn't bring across the security that we've been promised, God and protecting us in the land, then I think from a practical perspective, having some representation in the diaspora allows for physical protection or support that maybe we aren't ready to get or will not get through God.
Great. Okay, so there is a part of this that was part of the early Zionist question of, are we hastening the footsteps of the Mashiach? That's why some of the ultra-Orthodox are actually anti-Zionist, because they say this was a secular movement and it needs to be divinely sanctioned. It can't be people taking matters fate into their own hands. The Jews can't take fate into their own hands. We have to wait for the Messiah to bring us back there. But the other piece of it is the physical protection piece, right? That and we're going to get to this with actually our first source on the sheet. So it's a perfect segue, but I will take a couple more responses. Thank you. Which is that there's safety in dispersion, in the sense that God forbid, right, especially in an era of nuclear war, if we're all concentrated in one place, God forbid, right? What's the worst that could happen? So that there's also that piece. Go ahead, Sherry.
But just as people learn from us when we're in other places, or as we.
It's on. But hold it closer if you could. Yeah.
That people get to know us as people. And learn, and as friends and neighbors. I think that's important.
Right. So in combating anti-Semitism, right? If people don't know Jews, right? If all they know of Jews is what they hear or see in the media, but don't have Jewish neighbors and friends, already, right, the battle we face against anti-Semitism is an incredibly uphill, steep battle, but we need that representation and those relationships. Let's go Helena, and then I'll get Gary.
Anti-Semitism.
Interesting.
Join the United States. Another.
Go ahead, say more.
It was not, people didn't know the Jews, they knew
Right.
the Jews and they hated them.
Right, so that's why while the diaspora is important for all the reasons that we're talking about, Israel is crucial for that, many reasons, but one of which Helena is raising, which is that we can't just be a people of the diaspora, because that, first of all, there's the danger of assimilation, right? Without Israel, without a flourishing and a renaissance of what it means to be a Jewish people and culture in our ancestral homeland, there's the threat that we fizzle out in the diaspora, that we don't have that strong connection to our tradition and our past. But also, we might fool ourselves into thinking that we could actually be accepted when history reminds us over and over again that the world is not friendly to Jews, does not accept us. And that's the painful reminder of our present and of our history. Good, so let's jump into our text because we do have a lot. I'm gonna go ahead and share. So this first text you've all read and know well, but it was recently interpreted by a rabbi who's the vice president of Shalom Hartman Institutes of North America, Rabbi Justice Baird. And he read it in a way I've never considered before, so I wanted to share that with you. So who would like to read from Genesis 32:7? The context here is big strife between Jacob and Esau, brothers, who, like the other siblings in Genesis, had a big rivalry, sibling competition over the birthright and the blessing. Who's the firstborn? Who gets the advantages and benefits of the firstborn? Jacob steals the birthright, right? He basically, with the help of his mother, fools his father into getting that. And Esau swears that he's going to kill him once his father passes. Let the mourning of my father be at hand, and then I will kill you, right? So that's the last interaction the two had. Time has passed. Jacob sees his brother Esau approaching, and he's got 400 men with him, right? This is not good. This doesn't look good. So this is what he does. Who wants to read? Go ahead, Cindy.
Jacob was greatly frightened and he was distressed, and he divided the people with him into flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps.
So the first thing he does is he divides his family into 2 camps. What are the 2 camps we're talking about today? Israel and America. That was the Kiddush. That was the new way of reading this that Rabbi Justice Baird was interpreting. That we at what?
That was it?
Well, we're not ending the session today. But I'd never read it that way, and I think that's deeply interesting. And it goes to what you were saying about the protection piece of it, that God forbid, should one be attacked, we're not all concentrated in one place, that we're divided into 2 camps. But there's more than just the strategy, the military, the protective piece of it, right? There's a deeper significance and benefit to the relationship between Israel and the diaspora. So let's keep reading. Go ahead. Okay, good. So here's the question. Can we be in the diaspora without being an exile? And how do the rabbis view it, right? Do they view it as we are in galut, right? This is not the desired state of affairs, right? The goal is that we are all reunited back in Israel as soon as possible. And that's sort of the question of like, why are we still here if we could get on a plane to Israel, if we can make Aliyah tomorrow? I presume it's because many of us have determined that we no longer feel that we're in exile, but rather in the diaspora. That's really where and it emerges in Bavel. Historically, the first time this even becomes relevant is when we have the opportunity to return, right, from our exile to Babylon. But some say actually, and many do return, but many stay put, and they say we have it good here. And we're going to explore those texts and some of the reasons why that was the case. That's really the end of Galut in a certain sense, and the beginning of diaspora. Go ahead, Sheila. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And we have so many biblical examples of that too, right? When Lot's wife turns back to see that she can't, and she's paralyzed. She literally turns to a pillar of salt at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Even when you're coming from a terrible place, and even when it's up in flames, there's still a piece of you that says, but it's home, right? And there's also, of course, a big example of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, right? Well, we had the cucumbers and the leeks, right? We got that this week. Why did you take us out here, right? The uncertain, the unfamiliar, when even if the familiar had deep flaws, even if you were enslaved, there's something about the uncertainty that to many seems worse. So we left with a mixed multitude, and not everybody left Egypt. In fact, some rabbis say that the majority remained in Egypt or perished in the plague of darkness. So there's a whole interesting thing about that.
Now there are people who want to America.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you, here's what's it. So interestingly, I couldn't do what I do here, there. For one thing, as a conservative rabbi, as a non-Orthodox rabbi, I wouldn't be seen as, I mean, there are small circles where I could. I'm not saying I can't, but it certainly wouldn't be the same. I wouldn't have the same kavod. Or yeah, and also it's not really a viable lifestyle in the same way in terms of making a career of it, right? Which is great that in Israel there's so many rabbis and it's so great, it's so many. But here it's more of an actual sort of you're also a manager of a nonprofit. Not to reduce the synagogue to crass terms, but it's more of a job and a career, and in addition to a vocation, which I think is a uniquely American thing, at least in comparison to Israel. Sure. Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, so now the question of, but is diaspora treif, right? Is it even okay to be talking like, is it inherently treif, or is there biblical or rabbinic permission to even entertain life outside of Israel? So let's get to one of the first, or the earliest examples, I would argue, of it. Who wants to read from the Midbar, Numbers 32? Any takers? Go ahead, please, thanks.
We will not return to our homes until the Israelites, every one of them, are in possession of their portion. But we will not have a share with them in the territory beyond the Jordan. We have received our share on the east side of the Jordan. Moses said to them, build towns for your children and sheepfolds for your flock, but do what you have promised.
So this is sort of the first permission for living outside of the land of Israel, right? God's inheritance to us. Who are we to say thanks but no thanks to God, who's giving us the gift of our promised land? But Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh say, you know what, we got it pretty good. We have it made in the shade to the east of the Jordan River, right? This is cattle country. This is good for we want to stay here. And Moses basically falls on his face and says, basically, are we doing the spies thing all over again, where you're gonna deter the people, you're gonna dishearten them that they not go in to inherit the land that God has given us? This is tread lightly. This is a terrible sin you're about to commit. And they say, no, you have us all wrong. We're going to go in as shock troops. We are going to see this through. We're going to fight this battle alongside our brothers and sisters. But after we've inherited the land that's been promised to us, then we're going to go back to the east of the Jordan. We're not going to take our inheritance in the land of Israel itself. And Moses ultimately says that that's okay, as long as you fight with us. And that same rabbi that we brought here, Rabbi Nolan Leibovitz, one of the main points he makes in his book is that that's the job of American Jewry right now when Israel is at war, is to say that we stand with you, our Israeli brothers and sisters, right? We can't turn our backs on you until we can live peacefully and safely in our land, right? That there's this responsibility to say that we are here with you. And only then, once we're safe and in our land, then can we be, proud members of the diaspora. So that's sort of an interesting point that he makes. So there's permission, but strings attached, right? You can be in the diaspora, but there are these unfrayable strings, which are like the strings of the tzitzit, the fringes that, before the Shema, we gather from the four corners of the world. It's as if we're gathering the diaspora into one. There needs to be that underlying unity that we kiss with the tzitzit each time, right? That can't ever be frayed. Okay, a couple more responses. And just quick, are voices that I haven't heard yet, because I always want to hear from those who are passionate, want to keep, but I want to make sure that anybody who hasn't spoken yet has a chance. Go ahead, Marvin.
From a geographical standpoint, I thought God's only objection or geographical requirement was don't return to Egypt.
Right.
Abiding by his commandments had nothing to do with where you were when you did that.
Okay, good. So we're going to get to that, especially Egypt. But God says, just you're not allowed to return that way because that would undo this whole Exodus thing that I got out of bed for, right? I did some pretty amazing miracles for you and for you to turn back that way. So we're also not supposed to mimic the practices of the Egyptians, right? I use an electric razor because I can't actually have a physical razor pass through on my skin because there's a prohibition in the Torah because the Egyptians would cut the corners of their beards. The Orthodox would say, oh, an electric razor, that what a workaround, like that doesn't count, right? But I would say, well, it doesn't actually touch my face. And so I get to shave my face. But the point is, you're not supposed to go back to the Egyptians. You're also not supposed to abhor the Egyptian because before they enslaved us, they were good to us, right? God says you're not supposed to abhor them forever. What? They saved Moses, right? There are righteous Gentiles, if you will, whatever. Wait, okay, Sheila, and then I want to keep going.
Way, the Jews during the Holocaust, or just before the Holocaust, could not have been saved had there not been Jews in America or in other countries. What is the word? They're supporting them. So they could get visas.
Yeah, that is true. And at the same time, right, the SS St. Louis being turned back, right? So it's a mix, right? Amazing, right? So yes, right, that you sort of need that on both sides, like Israel is a safeguard so that those who could go nowhere else, where they were turned away from the rest of the world, have Israel, right? That's the miracle. But then also there's the other side of it too, where you need other places to go as well. Okay, let's keep going. This is a central text. Many of you may be familiar with it, but it is foundational when discussing diaspora and the destruction of the temple, which again, Tisha B'Av is all about. So who wants to read? This is a long one, but go ahead, Stuart, thanks. This is from Midrash, but it appears in Talmud as well, this story. But this I'm taking from Avot de Rabbi Natan, a collection of Midrash. Go ahead.
Once from then Zakkai left Jerusalem and Rabbi Yehoshua followed after him. And he saw the holy temple destroyed. Rabbi Yehoshua said, woe to us, for the place where all of Israel's sins are forgiven is destroyed.
Right, well, real quick, because that's the temple, we could do animal sacrifice and that would enact atonement for us. So woe to us, we have no way of getting forgiven now. Go ahead, yeah.
Rabbi Yochanan said to him, my son, do not be distressed, for we have a form of atonement just like it. And what is it? Acts of kindness, as it says in Psalms, for I desire kindness, not a well-being law.
Great, so real quick, that's al shlosha devarim, ha'olam omed, al avada. Keep going.
Worship.
Allah Torah, right? So the world still stands. I always focus on the last three pieces of that, right? On Torah, on worship or prayer, which is what we're saying here, and on acts of loving kindness, which is what we're saying here, right? You could, right? And in some cases here, they're saying that actually Gimilut Chasadim is more important. You could, as long as you have that, you don't need the avodah piece. That's at least in this case. But actually, the Reisha, the first part of that phrase is equally, if not more important. The world still stands, right? In the wake of the destruction of the, and this is Rabbi Feinstein who shared this with us when he came for my installation. The world, that's a radical statement. In the wake of the destruction of the temple, when our world is flipped upside down, resonance with today, of course, to say that the world still stands, that Jews still have hope, that we still have ways to survive. And what are those ways, right? Al ha-Torah ve'al avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim. Okay, keep going.
Rabbi Yochanan sent for his students, Rabbi Eliezer and Yehoshua, and said to them, my sons, take me out of this place. Make me a coffin and I will sleep in it. So Rabbi Eliezer held the coffin on one end and Rabbi Yehoshua held it on the other, and they carried him until the sun set right up to the gates of Jerusalem. The gatekeepers said to them, what is this? They replied, a dead body, and you know that a corpse cannot remain overnight in Jerusalem. They said, if that is a dead body, go ahead and take it out of the city. So they took him out and were carrying him until sunset, until they came to Vespasian, and they opened the coffin and Rabbi Yochanan.
He's a Roman official who ascends to Caesarhood, but go ahead.
Rabbi got up and stood before. He said, "Hi, ask for whatever you wish and I will give it to you." He replied, "I ask nothing from you except for the I will go there and teach my students and I will establish prayer and I will do all the means both mentioned in the Torah."
So the rabbi, we're going to unpack some of the symbols in this story, but the rabbis are split on whether Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did the right thing. Because Vespasian is giving him like a genie who, like a joke where the genie comes out of the bottle saying, "I'll grant you whatever you want." Right? And the rabbis go, "You blew it, right? Why wouldn't you say the temple? Why would you say, give me Yavna? You are surrendering." And that's what the rabbis who defend him say, that he was being practical. He never would have, that would never would have been approved. If he had said, spare the temple, it was beyond saving it. What do you say?
South of the Rehoboth.
South of Rehoboth, Ruth said. So give me Yavna and its sages, right? Basically saying that we can survive as a Jewish people outside of the land of Israel and without a temple, as long as we have a place to go to and a place where we can establish a Beit Midrash, right? Where we can establish Jewish homes, which become the focal point of Jewish practice, right? The Shabbos table becomes your altar, right? You wash your hands like you are now the high priests, right? We become the great innovation of rabbinic Judaism is that as long as we have a Jewish home, we can have Judaism, right? And a Beit Midrash, right? A center for Jewish learning. Those are the things we need. We actually can survive without the temple. That's radical and revolutionary. The central symbol here is the sort of genius of the plot, which is how do we break the siege here? Well, put me in a coffin. We'll pretend like I'm dead. And the Jews have a rule that we can't let a body out overnight. We know this from actually execution, that if you hang somebody because of capital punishment, you are not allowed to let the body hang overnight. You have to bury it right away. So even if this was somebody who did something so atrocious as to warrant the death penalty, there is still an inherent sanctity to the human body that deserves respect as a creature of God. So you have to bury the body. It's an offense to God to leave that body hanging or out overnight. So they're saying, okay, well, tell the Romans that, I died and I need to be buried. So take that way. They break the seal. They're okay, well, it's a ritual exemption. Go ahead. And then they go to Vespasian and here Rabbi Yochanan pops out of a coffin. What's the metaphor? Harry Houdini, good. Well, what's
Israel's not dead.
revival, right? Resurrection, if you will, right? To say that the temple might be dead, but the rabbinic tradition is being born. Yeah, but come on, we had it first. It's okay. Go ahead.
Well, this whole idea of going from being Jews of the wilderness to temple Jews to rabbinic Jews is a great progression for us. But with Moshiach coming and we go back to temple, it almost makes it feel like the whole rabbinic period. We can live, but what is it? You're alive, but you're not going to thrive. You're not becoming that next step. Or maybe you are. Maybe this is what we need. But it sure seems that if Moshiach, part of Moshiach wasn't bringing the third temple into being, then I think we could all be behind this rabbinic interpretation, maybe post-rabbinic interpretation. But it's already told to us, this is a way station. This is an in-between. And so I think there's some tension there.
That's the central question of the study today, which is this rabbinic tradition, is this diaspora thing, is it a Band-Aid? Is a way, like how you put it, is it a way station for when the Messiah comes and brings us back to Israel and we rebuild a third temple, which still needs to be our North Star, our greatest aspiration? Or are we sort of saying that, no, actually, I think this is the evolution that God always wanted for? That kind of gets back to Bob's point about is it all part of a greater plan? And so that in the conservative movement, we're split on that. You'll notice that there are prayers that have been removed from our Siddur that pray for we still have Rebuild Jerusalem, but there was a prayer in the Amidah, or actually just at the end of it, that says, rebuild the temple and then sacrifices will go back onto your altar. The conservative movement largely doesn't have that in our Siddur, but the Orthodox do. And so that is a difference in theology, which is this is still galut. This is still exile. This is not the preferred state of things. We're making the best of a bad situation, and we've been able to innovate for adaptability and for survival, but we can't say we're thriving until the Messiah comes and we're able to get back on track. Right? So that's the central tension. Is this a way station, or is this part of the destination? Is this inherently a good? So let's keep going and see how we can answer that.
Can I go
Yeah.
somewhere else?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that having the temple was a way station because Israelites did not have a temple or a mikdash before the golden calf. And they were just fine. I mean, yeah, they were in slavery, but before that, they were fine. And the Mishkan and the temple were the way station to get to where we are now.
Okay, so that's a great segue, actually. So that's the question is, do you need that centralized location, right? Or is God to be found anywhere? So let's read, this is another collection of Midrashim from Exodus Rabbi. Who wants to read? Go for it, Francis. Thank you. We're on page 2. This is the first full source.
The Holy Blessed One said to Israel, I sell to you my Torah, and as if such a thing could be, I am sold along with it. As it is said, and they shall bring me gifts. Exodus 25:2. This is similar to a king who had an only daughter. One of the kings came and took her and sought to go back to his land to marry her. He said to him, my daughter, who I've given to you, is my only one. I cannot bear to separate from her. But to tell you that you cannot take her is also impossible, since she is your wife. Rather do me this favor, that everywhere you go, make me a small room to be on, so that I can live with you, for I cannot leave my daughter. So said God to Israel, I have given you the Torah. I cannot bear to separate from her. And to tell you not to take her is also impossible. Rather, everywhere you go, make me one home, so that I can live with it as it is said, and make me a sanctuary. Exodus 25.
Right? So God gives us Torah, but it's like in this case, the analogy is a father or a king giving away his daughter and saying, I know that I can't keep her forever. I know I have to give her away, but make me a room, right? Let the in-laws have a place in your house, right? Some of it, right? Mixed feelings in the room about that. Yeah.
But you won't let them know.
Oh, I've done this. I can't, I've got points from my in-laws, right? We're in Cleveland and we see them often, but it's a blessing for us. We're lucky. We love each other. It's really a good relationship. And it's hard when the in-law relationship is tense and not everybody has the benefit of being on good terms and all that. But that saying like, okay, I get, but I have to be able to visit, and that you can make a sanctuary, right? That there's a couple things midrashically, and then I want to get to, one is I think here when it says from Exodus, and they shall bring me gifts, the Hebrew is the vayikuli truma, and I think midrashically the wordplay is that vayikuli, that they will take me as a gift. But instead of saying bring me gifts, I think the midrash here is saying that, okay, take my Torah, but also take me. I take my hand, take my whole life too, right? You can have it, you get me too. And then the second midrashic thing going on here is at the end, and make me a sanctuary that I may dwell betocham. God says, make me a sanctuary that I may dwell within you. You would think it would say within it, but it's plural. Make me a sanctuary that I may dwell within you. So that speaks to the portability of Judaism, of this Jewish enterprise, right? That while it's clear that God says you can't just bring offerings anywhere, but to the centralized location, right? And it also says, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, right? That from Jerusalem will come Torah. Like, make no mistake about it. You can't just do this Jewish thing anywhere, right? There needs to be a centralized location. But at the same time, that tension is that God also says, you bring me with you wherever you go. And the Kabbalists understand that the Shekhinah, God's imminent presence, was exiled along with us into Galut, right? That God was exiled with us. So there's that idea that God is, like Ron was saying, the God is everywhere though, right? There is an inherent sanctity to the land of Israel, right? We do believe that it is, of course, sacred land, but that's not the only place where God can be found. So this is what they call making a mikdash me'at, right? There's the main mikdash, the Beit HaMikdash, habayit, right, the house. But it's also possible to make a mikdash me'at. And historically, this is interesting because they didn't just take that metaphorically, they took that literally. We actually had 2 temples outside of the land of Israel. If you're familiar, one was called Beit Chonyo, which was built in around 170 BCE in Egypt, right? Going back to you just can't go back to Egypt. Well, we did in exile and actually built a little sanctuary with a temple where offerings were offered. And the other one is in the Elephantine, again in Egypt. And this was about the 6th century BCE. And the rabbis debate whether this was acceptable or not. And what they ultimately say is, b'diavad, it's okay, meaning it's not okay to do this instead of offering in the sanctuary, but if you did it, it's okay. If you've already done it, it's okay that you offered it there, right? So again, it's sort of the permission, the heter for a mikdash me'at, but that's in a literal sense, continuing to offer sacrifices just outside of Jerusalem. But what I'm more interested in is the metaphorical mikdash me'at, right? How do we make diaspora a mikdash me'at, a sanctuary where God can dwell outside the land of Israel? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jerry.
and then when Israel and Yehuda were separated, Israel also had a temple in their area for both.
Yes, but that was pre-Davidic, right? So there was Shiloh, right? But it was the reason it doesn't count as being controversial is that it was before the actual temples. So there was that altar in Eli, the priest, right? The story of Hannah, right? So there were other places where the people, but it was before we had it. These were after or during. Okay, let's keep going. Oh yes, go ahead, Bob.
So the Torah is a representation of God for the services. When the Torah stands, we stand. Torah here is female. So God is female.
Yeah, well, that's actually not a novel. The rabbis, the Kabbalists especially note that there's feminine and masculine aspects of God. Shekhinah, which we talked about, which is exiled with us into Galut. Shekhinah is God's feminine, imminent aspect, right? So great point, but not the first to make it, right? Not the first to make it. Obviously, Maimonides tells us that God transcends gender, right? Any human adjectives you can't use on God, right? It's just metaphor. You can't anthropomorphize God. Okay, let's keep going. So then we get permission, and this is the prime example from the prophet Yirmiyahu, from Jeremiah. And he is the weeping prophet of the exile, right? He lives through the destruction of the temple in 586, the first temple. And he is speaking to a people that are experiencing the destruction of the temple. And what does he tell them? Who wants to be Jeremiah? Go ahead, Larry.
That said, God of hosts, the God of Israel, the whole community that are exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their food. You should take wives and beget sons and daughters. And you should take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, but not decrease, and seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to God in its behalf. For in its prosperity you shall prosper. For thus said God, when Babylon's 70 years are over, I will take note of you, and I fulfill to you my promise of favor to bring you back to this place.
Okay, so Jeremiah is saying, don't be so downcast, downtrodden, says the weeping prophet, right? There is still life to be had, right? Ha'olam omed, the world still stands. It's basically permission. Go to Bavel, build houses, right? Continue to have weddings, bring joy into the world, and seek the welfare of the country in which you reside. Right? This is the whole counter to the dual loyalty anti-Semitic trope that we can't be trusted as loyal citizens of the countries in which we reside, or patriots, right? It's why we do the prayer for our country and the prayer for Israel, right? We have both flags proudly standing in our sanctuary because Jeremiah, it's in our sacred text, right? That we have a responsibility to both. But it doesn't have to be one at the expense of the other, right? That's the anti-Semitic trope of it all, that we can't be trusted. No, actually, we're commanded to be loyal patriots. But to both, right? We still always have, it's what, it shouldn't have to be one or the other. Go ahead.
It's on here, of course. I mean, this is like Moshiach and the third temple. We're hey, live here, do well, because in 70 years, it's going to go away and I'm going to bring you on back. Now, if it didn't have that ending, then I would accept what you're saying.
Okay, good. Well, let me counter that because it may or may not be messianic because.
Well, I'm not saying it's messianic, but it's this other message.
Yes. You still want to come back. Yeah.
Right. So, right.
Yeah, have a go bag, right? Like be comfy, but remember you're always, and look, we always, when we pray, it's face to Israel. Like there's no question that the longing for Israel and the return never goes away. Nobody's going to tell you that, like, be fine with never coming back. There's always that, but what's the nature of that connection? Do you have to physically be back, or do you just have to, like the fringes of the top, stay inextricably connected, right? And what does that mean? But the 70 years piece is true in terms of if you're looking for, like, I'm not going to believe prophets unless it actually happens. Jeremiah, his prophecy comes to fruition. 70 years later, basically on the button, Cyrus the Great of Persia gives the Jews permission to come, right? They conquer from the Babylonians, the Persians take over, and they give us, in exchange for quiet, religious freedom. So written after. You could say it was written after, and so yeah. But that destroys the magic, and right. And there's a debate. We don't know, right? There's scholarship that might suggest that, but you can also take the faith-based position that this is actually a prophecy that came true. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, I want us now, we're going to end with the text of a thinker named Shimon Ravidovans, and I'm not sure that I'm saying his name correctly. Ravidovich. Thank you. 1897, he's born, he dies 1950. By the way, Jeremiah died in Egypt, even though he prophesied, he died in Egypt. Well, what was what at the time, I don't know, but he dies in Galut is the point.
Oh, well, Galut, yeah.
Okay, so Ravidovich, born 1897, he dies 1957, right? So he lives through the Shoah. He gets out, he escapes, he survives before the final solution. A couple notes on him. He's the author of a book called Bavel and Yerushalayim. That's why I'm bringing him. He speaks directly to the question of the nature of the relationship between Israel and the diaspora, Bavel and Yerushalayim, or the United States and Israel. He ultimately comes to America, to Brandeis from Berlin. He's born in Poland to an Orthodox family, but he goes to Berlin. Then, of course, the Nazis rise to power and he escapes to the United States. He's best friends with David Ben-Gurion. Some other things about him. Well, let's go ahead and read him and then we'll discuss. So who would like to, this is from an excerpt from The Existence of the Diaspora. This is not from his book, Bavel and Yerushalayim, but it gets to the same points. Who would like to go ahead? Nina, thanks.
You want the one at the top?
Yes, we're on the top of page 3.
Those who wish to go to the land of Israel should go to the land of Israel. Those who wish to go to the diaspora should go to the diaspora. To this diaspora in Germany And to the other Jewish diasporas, it will be said, regardless of whether you leave the Galut or stay there, lead a Jewish life, carry the yoke of Jewishness with the sadness and joy of creation, be partners in the building of the land and furthering life in the diaspora. We are neither saying stay in exile all your days, nor build ye houses and dwell in them, and plant gardens and eat the fruit of them, and not even leave exile when they have no way out, but rather be whomever you may be and be Jewish, and I will multiply them, and they shall not, wait a minute.
You got it?
And I will multiply them, and they shall not be few. Jeremiah, the man of Ananoth, had instructed in a letter he sent from Jerusalem to the elders of the exiles and to the priests and prophets and all the people that Nebuchadnezzar exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon, and multiply in the diaspora as Jewish as the bearers of the existence of the people of Israel and its destiny.
So I love that charge. Basically, wherever you are, diaspora or Israel, be Jewish. Carry the sadness and the joy of it, right? Be ambassadors for Judaism wherever you are. A couple of his main points, and then we'll read one more piece from him, but he says that he argues there should always be two centers of Jewish life. He's saying that it's not just a way station and it's not just making the best of a bad situation. He's saying that it actually strengthens the Jewish people when there are two centers of Jewish life and when there is a strong relationship, obviously, between the two centers, right? So he says Jews are best served when there's a symbolic Bavel and Yerushalayim, right? In this case, we could say the symbolic Bavel and Yerushalayim is Israel, the modern state, and the United States, the two camps. Bavel needs to be the US or the diaspora more broadly, but there need to be two poles, two capitals. And in this case, of course, he's raised in an Orthodox family. He's traditional. You could see he exudes the language of our text. He even speaks Talmudically. And in speeches, he'll say things like, but it would arise on your mind that, or which is a Talmudic phrase, it's just, you'll see when we read him that he even speaks Talmudically. But he's not just saying that like America is sloppy seconds. He's saying it's actually crucial to the Jewish people that there be two capitals. Two capitals. That's the language of equality. Though again, as a traditional guy, I don't think he would suggest that Israel doesn't have that unique sanctity that makes it elevated in that sense, or is more central to our Jewish identities, of course. But still, it's elevating the diaspora in that way, to be in partnership with Israel. Okay, now this is an address to the Hebrew Youth League. And he's talking about Hebrew culture, both the speaking of modern Hebrew as a language, but also Judaism as a culture, a Hebrew culture. Who wants to read this? Go ahead.
Michael, it starts with briefing it, it's long.
In brief, yeah.
In brief, the stronger Hebrew culture is in the diaspora. The better are the prospects for a really sound and deeply rooted Jewish culture in Palestine. The more possible a real cultural cooperation between Jewry in Palestine and Jewry in the diaspora. The more Hebrew and values of Jewish culture Jews import to Palestine, the more Jewish culture will Palestine be able to export to the diaspora. So the Hebrew movement has a twofold task. For the diaspora itself and for Palestine. But you must never consider all the duties connected with Hebrew and cultural work as merely a kind of mental preparation for Palestine. It is only one principle and practically much more in the system of Jewish law. We have two kinds of mitzvot. Laws which apply only in the land of Israel and those that do not.
Right, so that's ha-tluin ba'aretz, v'she'eno tluin ba'aretz. The laws that depend on, that are reliant on being in the land of Israel, which he'll give some examples, like Shemitah, right? Laws that can only be fulfilled in the land of Israel, but there are also laws that can't, that have to be fulfilled outside. So he's saying, actually, in order to fulfill all the commandments in Torah, you actually need two centers too, in the land and outside the land. Okay, go ahead.
Can you scroll down so
Yes,
those of us on Zoom can read it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Those dependent on Palestine only like Shemitah, sabbatical year, and those which are not confined to Palestine. I have never found any authority for making Jewish culture a kind of duly confined to Palestine only. As human beings, we are forced by our own nature to have some kind of culture. Many do not realize it. Very happy people indeed. And as members of the Jewish community, we are forced by our own natures, although reluctantly, by a complex of internal and external, political, economic, and social conditions and circumstances, to have a Jewish culture peculiar to ourselves. Nobody can escape this supreme necessity. We, for our part, do not even want to escape it. Hebrew culture is a duty imposed by all those forces on the Jewish nation as such and on every individual member of it, everywhere, anywhere, independent of this or other places. It is easier to fulfill all the duties connected with Hebrew culture in Palestine. It is difficult here in this country or in other countries of the diaspora, but the more difficult it is, the stronger and greater must be the sacrifices and efforts for this aim. Your own will for Hebrew culture, the active and creative part that you yourselves are willing to play in this effort for that culture, to develop cultural activities colored by your own life and which answer your needs without ignoring the facts of the world around you. That is what matters.
So there's a lot here. Yes.
He wrote it before the establishment of the state of Israel.
Well, because he's calling it Palestine. Yeah, so this was given on November 8th, 1936. And he gave it, which is why I'm glad that Francis read it, to the Anglo-Jewish Youth Conference for Hebrew at First Avenue Hotel in London. Yes, so that's key context, right? And also you could say that a lot of what he says falls apart when held up to the Holocaust, the Shoah, right? This is in 36. So that's but a couple things that I want to elevate from here, and then I want to hear your thoughts, then I'll give one last send-off thought. But I think this gets back to the idea that unlike that first text where we talked about Jacob dividing into two camps as a strategy, right, for preservation, that he's really getting at, it's not just that, right? It's not just a military strategy. It's not just if one group gets attacked, the other survives, right? But that it's actually of moral significance. That if we only had Bavel, if we only had the diaspora, we could peter out to assimilation, right? We need Israel. We can't survive without it. But if we only had Jerusalem, if we only had Israel, then Judaism would just be about nationalism and isolationism, which he's saying is not to the general good of Judaism, which needs a Hebrew culture, right? We need to be more than just about nationalism and isolationism, right? But we also can't be victims of assimilation or the goodwill of our overlords, whoever they may be at the time, right? And finally, America serves as a check. Talking about our current situation, America, the current iteration, major iteration of the diaspora, as a check on Israeli nationalism and isolationism, but Israel serves as a check to diasporan or American assimilationism and fraying of the fringes that make us Jewish and tie us to our ancestral homeland. So thoughts, reflections on the conversation writ large or on any of these texts we just talked about? Go ahead, Larry.
Thoughts. One, many years ago, there was a small paperback book published, either Jews Garden History or the history of.
That's it.
That the one,
Yeah, and Diamond.
yeah, Diamond, that actually makes a case for the fact that Judaism and Jews would not have survived if the temple had stayed. It was something located, I don't know the whole premise. It was very well laid out many years ago. The second thing I want to say is, having lived in Israel, and some people may not agree with me, here, most of us, I think, would probably say we are Jews happen to live in America and in Israel. What I found having lived there was they are Israelis. They happen to be Jewish. Very different perspective. I think that plays a lot into that. Perhaps why we need a diaspora, except for the whole Arab thing, conflict. There isn't the pushback on religion as there is here. Israel is mostly secular. Culturally, yeah, there's a lot going on. Friday nights are sacrosanct, even more now than they were in the past for secular Jews. But without the pushback and everything else, it's a whole different perspective there that you can be an Israeli and being Jewish is something that's.
It's so interesting, right? And there's growth in the tension. I think that's what he's talking about. It's easier to be a Jew in Israel, even if you're not religious, right? Like you live and breathe Judaism, and that is such a precious thing that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, right? You try to create little pockets. I lived in Pico Robertson in LA, it's little Israel, right? But it's not the same. When you live in Israel, it's different than when you live in Pico Robertson, right? It's a feeling and it's palpable, right? That said, I think what he's saying is when you have to work for it,
That's a negative.
there is different and extra fruit that can be had from when you have to work for it, right? And I think one fruit you could say is denominationalism, pluralism, right? That exists, took root in America in a way that can't necessarily take root in Israel. So that's why he's saying there are benefits to diaspora, but it then goes back, we import it back into Israel, and Israel exports it out to America, right? Like that's the cultural renaissance that is strengthened by the partnership of the diaspora, is that you need those two centers that are fueling each other's renaissance, right? That there are some things that can only grow native to Israel, some things that can only grow native to, the diaspora or America. And that's kind of the mitzvot that are dependent only on the land and that are outside the land. The one prime example, and then I'll let you guys have the last word, is we have two Talmuds. Which one do you know? The Bavli. And that's not to say that the Yerushalmi is any less than. Actually, the Yerushalmi sort of had to be written quicker and there was more political pressure to get it done, whereas, and like Christian, oppression about it. Whereas in the Bavli, they actually had the freedom to elaborate and spend more time with it. But the point is the Babylonian Talmud would never have happened if not in exile, right? So there are real fruits to have when you have to work harder for it. And that is the charge that I wanted to leave with all of us, is that the necessity of that Jewish culture, and that especially in America, where it's not something that we live and breathe, that we have to work harder for it, but that working harder for it can yield, dare I say, greater fruits, right? That we then bring with us to Israel. And it's this exchange that continues to deepen and strengthen the Jewish people. So that's my charge to us as we go off into Galut of a summer hiatus, and we will return, and not in 70 years. Oh, Rabbi Artson, I told Shani, if you're a Rabbi Artson Scholar in Residence, June 20, he's the Dean of Rabbinical School of Ziegler, the Rabbinical School. He's a giant in the movement. Please come, you won't regret it. He's amazing. Starting on the 20th, he'll be here, Scholar in Residence. Oh, we're gonna resume on, what did we say? What did I say? August 7th. So we're actually gonna come back 2 weeks earlier than initially planned. August 7th, we'll be back.